The Forum at 8 with Sakina Kamwendo.
And thank you so much for joining us. And at least 17 people have been killed over the past weekend in clashes linked to symbolic declaration of independence by Cameroon's English-speaking minority. Now, the separatists, we understand, chose October the 1st for this declaration as it marks the anniversary of the official reunification of Anglophone and Francophone parts of Cameroon in 1961. The country's Anglophone regions are demanding independence and are calling on government to stop imposing French on their educational and legal systems. The English speakers also say that they suffer discrimination and inequality at the hands of the Francophone majority. President Paul Biya has opposed any moves towards a secession or towards a federal state. And on the program this morning, we endeavor to unpack the issues around this crisis in Cameroon and try and understand exactly what is going on. And the lines are open, 0891 104 208. You can also tweet or Facebook us at AM Live on SAFM, or you can send me an email to Sakina, Sakina, at safm.co.za. And joining us to help us understand this crisis in Cameroon, Dr. Fonteh Akum, who is a Senior Researcher, Peace and Security Research Program at the Institute for Security Studies. Thanks for your time this morning, Dr. Akum.
Thank you, Sakina. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And we also have Ilaria Allegrozzi, who's with Amnesty International. Thanks for your time as well.
Thank you for having me as well.
So let's start here. I think it would be good just to go back and understand the history in terms of placing the current crisis into context. So, Dr. Akum, first of all, the Anglo-Francophone divide in Cameroon, how does that come about, first and foremost?
Well, first of all, it must be understood that there is a colonial legacy to the Anglophone problem in Cameroon. West Cameroon, what used to be West Cameroon, was formerly administered by the British as part of Eastern Nigeria. And in 1961, after the Fumban Conference in July, there was a negotiation for a referendum to be held, after which there was reunification on the 1st of October 1961 between the Anglophones and Francophones. So here it might be important to actually note that the two parties getting into this reunification came in from completely different perspectives. While the Anglophones came into the union in order to protect their minority status and actually escape marginalization within the eastern part of Nigeria, the Francophones got into this union led by President Ahijo at the time, basically looking at the federation as a simple signpost on the road to a unitary state. And that unitary state was something which was never envisioned, I think, by the Anglophones who met at Fumban. And subsequently, it must also be noted that the government of Cameroon, the Federal Republic of Cameroon, worked over the years to actually divide the Anglophones between the unitarist and the federalist. And this kind of factionalism, was one in which the unitarists were always favored and the federalists were disfavored. So along the way, Cameroon became a Federal Republic of Cameroon, a United Republic of Cameroon, and then in 1984, kind of by presidential fiat again, Cameroon became the Republic of Cameroon. And a lot of Anglophones would look at this as an attempt to wipe out the Anglophone part of Cameroon's history, and I think that's part of the basis for a lot of the contestation that we are seeing today.
So this contestation has always been there. Is there anything to suggest that it is gaining momentum, the move to actually separate or secede from Cameroon by the minority at this stage?
Well, if we look at the duration and the intensity of this current phase, which began in November of last year, we think that this is the longest of the contestation that we have seen so far. It's important to actually go back to the early 1990s. The Anglophone part of Cameroon, particularly Bamenda, has always been a hotbed of political dissent. Growing up in Cameroon, one of the first books I read on the politics of the country was Albert Mukong's Prisoner Without a Crime. And this book actually speaks of the ordeal of this individual who was pushing for democracy within Ahidjo's Cameroon, and in return he got incarcerated, tortured in the torture chambers in Cameroon and stuff like that, right? And in 1990, as we tried to push for multi-party politics in Cameroon, again on the 26th of May 1990, the Social Democratic Front was launched in Bamenda, and 6 Anglophone Cameroonians were killed in the process. Of course, we can say they were Cameroonians, but they died in Bamenda. After which Biya acceded to multi-party politics in Cameroon. However, and then after ostensibly losing the elections in 1992, there was a declaration of a state of emergency on Bamenda again in the Northwest Province for over 3 months. So politically, when you look at it in historical context, there is much that has been done prior to this current wave. But we also are seeing a generational shift in the struggle. While in 1992, the Anglophones met in Boya for the All Anglophone Conference, you had people like Ekontang Elad, Simon Munzu, and Carlson Anyangwe leading the struggle. Those are sort of the forefathers of the struggle. I must also mention Fongorji Dinka. And fast forward to what we are seeing today. We saw the lawyers basically take a stand in November last year. We saw the teachers take a stand. We are not referring anymore to the Munzus and the Anyangwes. We are referring these days to the Fontemnibas and the Agbobalas. So this is a new generation, and the new generation is actually approaching the struggle much differently than the forebears did. In 1993, after the All Anglophone Conference, the Anglophone Cameroonians came up with ideas on how to return to a federation. While people are looking at October 1st, 2017 as the symbolic declaration of independence, let's also remember that on October 1st, 1996, Henry Fossong, then the head of the Southern Cameroon's National Council, basically made a speech as well in which he called it a National Day of Prayer, and the intent was also to try to symbolically declare independence. Now, there's been a passing of the guard. The intensity now seems a little more profound. We are also seeing the population subscribe to this cause, and I think it's one of those that would need to be dealt with very, very seriously. It's important to unpack the actors, the issues, and the processes to see exactly how Cameroon could move out of this phase of contestation.
And of course, from what we've been seeing and the reports that we've been watching, it would seem that the rights groups themselves are finding, it difficult to operate under these circumstances. There's talk about increased repression and security forces even preventing an Amnesty International news conference. And maybe you can tell us more about that, Ilaria.
Exactly. When we went to Cameroon last time, it was in May, for an advocacy mission with an Amnesty delegation, and the idea was also to hold a press conference to speak about the case of 3 students who have been arrested and charged under the anti-terror law, and have been sentenced to 10 years prison. So we wanted to speak about this emblematic case and call for the release of these 3 students. But the press conference was banned, and the hotel where the press conference was supposed to be held was stormed by the police, and we couldn't eventually hold the press conference. And this was the last time we were in Cameroon in May 2017. Amnesty International has been researching and documenting human rights violations by the security forces and also abuses by Boko Haram in the context of the conflict in the far north region since at least 2015, and we have published 3 reports. The last one was issued in July. and focused on torture and illegal detention in illegal detention facilities run mainly by the security services and the army, and in particular the elite unit of the Cameroonian army. I mean, the human rights record of Cameroon has been problematic, and the conduct and discipline of the security forces has been also problematic, as Amnesty International has documented in the past. We have documented several human rights violations by the police, the gendarme, and the army, and in particular the BIR in the far north region, and especially in the context of fighting Boko Haram, arbitrary arrests, enforced disappearances, unlawful killings, extrajudicial executions, and especially torture. We have documented over 100 cases of people who have been held incommunicado and tortured by the army and by members of the secret services, at least since 2014. And all those people have been arrested on suspicion of belonging to Boko Haram, oftentimes with little to no evidence, and have been held in secret with no access to the outside world in torture sites, including military bases, including facilities run by the secret services, and including also facilities which were not meant to be army barracks or, detention facilities anyway, like a school, for example, in the border town of Fotokol.
I'm just trying to understand. Are you saying that the Cameroonian government is simply, clamping down on the Anglophone side of this divide without any provocation, that they are just simply trying to repress whatever is coming out of there, the calls for secession, and nothing wrong is being perpetrated from the other side? Is that what we are saying, Ilaria?
I think it should be clear that, for example, as far as Amnesty International research is concerned, we have been able to document several incidents of violence in the context of the demonstrations in the Anglophone regions. And I think it should be clear that, like in most of the circumstances we have documented, we have seen peaceful protesters, but also protesters with, holding sharp objects or grenades or throwing stones at the security forces. So it's important to acknowledge also that, we shouldn't call these protesters always peaceful protesters, because in certain cases, as we have seen, protesters were also violent. And in fact, we have also observed the creation of some more radical and extremist groups since, during the course of this year, and possibly also because of the heavy-handed response by the security forces. Repression increases radicalization. But in most of the circumstances we have documented, we have seen peaceful protesters and news of excessive and unnecessary force by the security forces to put down the demonstrations and to do crowd control.
I see the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has also commented on this, and to quote him, he says representatives of the Anglophone community should seek solutions to the community's grievances within the framework of the Cameroonian Constitution. Is that possible, Dr. Akum?
Well, it is possible, but it's one of those where I think that placing the onus on the Anglophones to find a solution is too much of a responsibility, right? Because how much of the power do the Anglophones have? Let's understand something. Let's make it very clear that there's an asymmetry of forces here, and the asymmetry of forces basically places the government of Cameroon in a hegemonic position. At the origins of the current contestation, there were the lawyers who were asking for something, and the teachers were asking for something else, right? And at that point, we would have seen a very simple solution. I mean, we thought that it was one of those things which was going to be resolved with the president's creation of the National Commission on Bilingualism, which unfortunately, we have not seen exactly anything come out of that commission since it was created. Second, this problem cannot be solved exclusively by the Anglophones. There needs to be a discussion. There needs to be a dialogue. And I thought it was welcoming reading from Fans Venkat yesterday that the president had posted on Twitter saying he was against any form of violence and he wanted to push towards dialogue. Now, the Cameroon's constitution in 1996 actually lays the framework for a 10-state federation, and that's what led to the creation of regions. But the autonomy that was supposed to devolve to the regions as a result of this constitution has never been implemented. So we do have frameworks in Cameroon. We have had frameworks before, but the challenge is that a lot of these frameworks have only existed on paper and have not been adequately operationalized. Now, the question as to whether it can be solved within the framework of the current Cameroonian dispensation, I would not be able to give you that question. It's a question that you'd have, it's a question which would be answered by the government of Cameroon on one side and the representatives of these southern Cameroonian communities on the other. But that said, I think that a solution is possible. President Biya, before heading out to New York for the UN General Assembly, made a move by releasing some of the Anglophone prisoners, common law prisoners. However, when you step back, not all the prisoners were released. And listening to the spokesperson of Cameroon, Issa Chiroma Bakari, saying we would continue to hold those who have blood on their hands. I mean, when you look at a person like Mancho Bibikse, who is still being held by the government of Cameroon, you wonder exactly what blood he must have on his hands, right? So it's one of those issues which is polemical. The government of Cameroon has not come to the negotiating table. One. Two, it's put certain elements of the potential discussion off the table because it's clear that they don't want to talk about federalism. They don't want to talk about independence or secession for the southern Cameroonians, which, however, when you look at the evolution of the crisis, the government itself, with its over-militarized response, has created a dialectic of violence where the peaceful voices have actually progressively been marginalized from the discourse to the extent that the more docile Anglophone voices who would actually, and it must be noted here that the Anglophone community is not completely homogeneous on this cause. So if you take that heterogeneity, the dialectic of violence that was put in place by the militarization of the government's response has given more voice to the more extremist and secessionist elements who tell their communities, look, we have tried to dialogue with this government and we have not gotten anything out of dialogue, so we might need to look for other means. And I think the solutions are there. The government simply has to come to the table, and the southern Cameroonians have to come to the table as well with clean hands and with cool heads and without putting anything off the table. I think they would reach a solution. It's very possible.
Well, as we speak, on cue, we have Milton, spokesperson for the South Cameroon's Ambazonia Consortium United Front, an activist here calling. He's joining us on the line now. Milton, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Sakina, and greetings to the listeners.
So as I was asking Dr. Akum there about the suggestion from the United Nations Secretary General for you to find, from the Anglophone community, to find a workable solution within the constitutional framework of the Cameroonian state. Do you think that is possible?
Sakina, I would like us to note that the struggle of the southern Cameroon's people, Ambazonia, is not only just, it's legitimate. The two countries, the southern Cameroons and the La République du Cameroon, indeed came together to form a confederation. They had to come together and form one big federation where these two countries will run two different governments, manage their own resources, and hence, in that process, protect their own interests. What has happened over the last 56 years is that the bigger party, which makes up 80% of the country, La République du Cameroon, what many people consider French Cameroon, has simply occupied the southern Cameroons, forgot about its own national integrity, treated citizens of that country like slaves, changed the form of government that the Union had clearly indicated in a constitution written by La République du Cameroon in clause number 47, that the form of government would never be changed, and completely wiped out our national identity. Now, a lot of our leaders, every time when they rise up to say this kind of injustice is dangerous, it's going to blow out at some point, what this government has done is it arrested them, locked them for a long time, and really terrorized them. So what you see happening recently is something that has been fought by our leaders for quite a long time, especially from 1993, when the Anglophone community came together to say, we need to fix this thing. Now, I would like us to take note again, Sakina, that La République du Cameroon had independence on the 1st of January 1960. The southern Cameroons on the 1st of October 1961, almost 2 years apart. So the moment a government doesn't want to realize that these are two people, and so if there's a challenge, they must come and sit down on the table and engage as two separate people, that would be a problem. Now, can this problem be solved? The Governing Council has always believed in peaceful dialogue, and that's why you would notice that when we protested on the 22nd of September, we protested with peaceful plants and white cloth. None of our people had a stone shot at any government institution. The videos are there to prove that. When we celebrated the restoration of independence, after trying to negotiate with government for a very long period of time, we didn't even have stones. And we had to do this because when you fail to address the root causes of issues like the United Nations had requested, people will have to take what is theirs. Do take note that when Barrister Paul Biya, where Justice Aya for the highest justice in the country, and Taka and our other leaders started raising these concerns about our people, they had requested that government comes to the table so that they have honest dialogue. Government responded with a lot of repression by saying, one, they don't want to hear about federation. Anybody who mentions federation is a terrorist. These guys were caught up and locked up and charged for terrorism. And the question again is, these were two countries that came together to form a confederation of two nations. When its citizens rise up and they say, we want us to talk about the form of state, you charge them for terrorism, you treat them terribly. Some of our brothers, 12 of them, were locked up in a bunker, without water, without electricity, without toilets. One of them, Patrick Asa Dango, had to sneak out a video for people to know they were in bunkers. So how many more of our people are in bunkers?
208.
The Forum at 8 with Sakina Kamwendo.
Well, thanks for staying with us. We are exploring and unpacking the issues around the crisis in Cameroon. And for interest's sake, when we talk about Cameroon, many of you saying that you're actually learning this morning, and it's so important that we know what's happening on the rest of the continent. Well, the Anglophone community in Cameroon makes up about 20% of the 22 million Cameroonians. And French is spoken in 8 out of Cameroon's 10 regions, and English in the northwestern and southwestern regions. And so what's happening at the moment is that the Anglophone regions are calling for authorities to stop imposing French on their educational and legal systems, among others, and perhaps looking for a chance to reconfigure Cameroon. And this morning we are in conversation with Dr. Fonteh Akum, who's a Senior Researcher at the ISS. We also have Ilaria Allegrozzi from Amnesty International, and from the South Cameroon's Ambazonia Consortium United Front, Mr. Milton Taka, the spokesperson for SCACUF. Now, Mr. Milton Taka, just before we open the lines, 0891 104 208, they are open. Just before the break, I was asking exactly what it is that you are seeking as a solution to this problem.
Sakina, we can only solve this problem through dialogue. Countries that have gone through war for long eventually sit around the dialogue table. And our biggest concern is, why would the government of the Republic unleash a petty tribal militia, that's a militia from the government side, to come and massacre so many of our people? About 71 have been killed, more than 500 wounded, more than 300 kidnapped, and we hear of mass graves where people have been buried. Sakina, it's important that the international community understands that this is not a language problem. It is not a problem between Francophones and Anglophones.
I found that very interesting that it was actually dubbed as such.
Yes. No, that's true. And again, let's please take note that we are not secessionists. We are separating. There's a difference in international law when you separate as opposed to secession. You only secede when you're part of a country at independence. The Southern Cameroons was never part of La Republic at independence. We were ruled from Nigeria for 37 years. We joined them to form a confederation that never worked. And in every marriage, when you get it and it doesn't work, you have a right to go out. And what these people have now done is not only killed so many people, they went into a number of our communities. If they don't kill you, they shoot your legs like what happened in Sierra Leone, so that those legs are being amputated. They burned down almost the whole village. The village of the leader of our struggle was almost roasted down, including his house. Bikes of master degree holders and PhD holders who can't get jobs in that country because our people are treated as second-class citizens and their future can never be protected in that country. We're burned down, including their businesses. So we are scared that this mass manslaughter that is going unabated and the international community is sitting on the fence will turn into a genocide because it moved into a tribal militia being unleashed on people that are demanding for what is theirs. We are restoring our independence because the UN on the 24th of April 1961 voted massively. 64 people voted yes against 23 that voted no, that we should celebrate our independence on the 1st of October. So there's nothing wrong the Southern Cameroon people are doing. So what is the way forward? There should be dialogue on a neutral territory. The dialogue should be supervised or must be supervised by the United Nations that violated Resolution 1514 of 14 December 1960 that said colonialism or black on black, colonialism like what we see happening now in Cameroon is a crime against humanity and a threat to world peace. The UN did not make sure that Britain prepares for independence, and that's what is leading to the carnage we are seeing today. Secondly, the Southern Cameroon is militarized. It's a war zone. You've got military people armed to the gear on every street. We listened to a video yesterday where a grandmother cannot go out of her house to go to the toilet. People cannot even go out to drink water. And young men were crying that rather than excreting in the house and drinking our own disease and eating and drinking our own peace, we want guns to fight back. But the governing council believes there's no reason for us to fight because we are a country and this can be negotiated on a round table with all parties. That's what we're crying. A lot of our leaders remain jailed after being abducted. Mancho, BBC, Penn, Terence, a lot of them are in bunkers. A lot of families have their loved ones that they have no idea where they are. When we hear of mass graves, we don't know how many people have been killed. So our cry as the governing council is the international community must stop sitting on the fence. And let's not be fooled by what Mr. Paul Biya said that he condemns dialogue. Who ordered the shooting? Who ordered this mass slaughter of Southern Cameroonians? That's what the Southern Cameroon people want to know. Because up until now, we don't even have stones to fight these people with. We've not thrown stones at any of their structures. All we're demanding is the restoration of our independence that was declared. That will be defended because it is a right rooted in international law.
Eric in Cape Town, I'll come to you shortly. I just want to put this question to Ilaria about what's happening on the ground at the moment because the Cameroonian government has recently created the National Commission on Bilingualism and Multiculturalism, and that commission is to report directly to President Biya. To what extent have those engagements happened, and are they engaging comprehensively on the matters at hand?
Many people I've spoken with, they told me about the creation of this commission as a sort of cosmetic solution to a larger problem, and people are calling for the authorities to open a real dialogue and to address the root causes and the grievances of the Anglophone community since a long time. But let me come back, if possible, on the issue of human rights violations, because I heard my colleagues speaking about the violations and the crimes committed by the security forces in the context of the demonstration since last October, but also this weekend. And indeed, we have been able to document and to verify that at least 17 people have been killed. This is a conservative report. We have also put out the figures that we could verify through our sources, and we have cross-checked information about casualties with, our sources on the ground, multiple contacts with journalists, activists, civil society members, ordinary citizens, and we are very concerned about the response, the heavy-handed response of the security forces on peaceful protesters, and especially by the climate of fear that people are living into. I've spoken with dozens of people in the Anglophone regions yesterday. People, they told me, we are scared, we live in fear, since also at least 4 days, internet has been shut down. We didn't talk about the internet issues, but internet and telecommunication services should be restored in the Anglophone regions, because shutting down internet services in an unjustified way is just an unjustified attack on internet freedom, freedom of expression in not only in the Anglophone regions, but in Cameroon in general. And this really shows how far the authorities are willing to go to muzzle, the criticism and the dissent, and to make sure that people report on what's going on in these localities and towns, because let's also remember that in over 40 towns and cities across the Anglophone regions over the weekend, demonstrations, protesting was going on. So, it is important for the people to report on what's going on, also for journalists to be able to cover the different events and to report on casualties, people being injured. We have had a number of information by different sources of also many people being injured and being at a critical, in critical conditions at the hospital. But it has been difficult for people to communicate with us as well, and for us with them. I wanted to speak briefly about another issue which is at concern at the moment, besides, of course, the fact that it is important to investigate the excessive use of force by the security forces during the protesting. It's the issue of mass arrest. We have been told that many people have been arrested since at least 3 weeks in different towns and cities across the Anglophone regions, in particular in Boya, but also in Bafut, where on Sunday night at least 100 people have been arrested and are currently being held in different locations. And because we have observed this in other contexts in Cameroon, we know that oftentimes mass arrest can be very arbitrary. So it is important to arrest people on the basis, on a legal basis, with an arrest warrant and with solid evidence that they have, they are suspected of having, some sort of criminal responsibility. But in what we have seen, these arrests are often arbitrary. So it is important to make sure also that the conditions of detention are human and that people are treated as they should be according to the national and international standards. While, as I was saying before, the human rights record of the Cameroonian security forces is very problematic. And we know that when people are arrested, oftentimes they are held incommunicado with no possibility to access the outside world, and they are beaten up and tortured. By the way, this is an image that I had recorded in Boya on on Monday, an eyewitness told me that a police officer insulted and beaten up people who had been arrested in the context of the demonstrations on Sunday and threw tear gas in a vehicle, closing the door and letting people suffocating in it. Eventually, the door was open. Three of the suspected, they fell on the ground. And I mean, this is a very serious incident, and it happened on Monday in Buea. It should be addressed, and the security forces should refrain from using excessive force and respecting, human rights.
And of course, the Cameroonian authorities, when they are good and ready, will be afforded an opportunity to respond to all of these allegations. But let's take some calls. 0891 104 208. Eric in Cape Town. Good morning, and thanks for your patience.
Good morning, Sakina. How are you?
Well, and you? I'm
fine. I won't be too long, but I will be very brief. The ongoing problem in Cameroon is kind of explaining exactly the real situation of Cameroon since the past 80 years today. We have in Cameroon a system whereby, for those who knows really what is democracy, we can't call democracy in Cameroon. I'm coming from actually two backgrounds in Cameroon, means a Francophone background and an Anglophone background. Many people might be asking themselves why maybe the majority of 80% of French-speaking Cameroonians might not be in strike as well in solidarity with the other Cameroonians. It's just the fact that having two systems in Cameroon, we have the French system and the English system, and the English system brought up with different understanding of different views from the French-speaking Cameroonian. The French-speaking Cameroonian was under a strong oppression and colonization from the French Republic. And the French Republic, until today, they still have the majority, they still have the control of the whole country. It means we can have Paul Biya for the past 30-something years, but actually it's the French government that is governing Cameroon. Different from the Anglophone system, whereby the power comes from the bottom, from the people going all over the top, where you have in the Anglophone system, the power comes from the French system, the power comes from the top and imposed it from the people downstairs. And we will see the situation whereby today we can speak about maybe dialogue and try to understand each other to solve this problem. But I will really question exactly with who are we going to dialogue, with who, if they really trust the government of Cameroon, because whatever dialogue that will happen, I'm not trying to be too spectacle, but whatever dialogue that will happen with this current system, we must just know that there won't be a positive outcome. We still have the same problem in the next 10, 2, 3 years. A country that cannot respect even the current constitution that is in place. I don't know how you can trust this country. And we can keep on going like this for the next maybe 60 years. I'm just hoping and I'm praying personally that this ongoing problem, this English-speaking problem that we're facing now in Cameroon could help and create a truth condition, a truth platform in order to discuss for the truth independence, the truth liberation of Cameroon. Because for me, personally, I think Cameroon is still under the colonization of French, under the oppression of the French government, under the control of every single thing that we can call about repression. So there's no democracy in Cameroon personally, and we can take it from there.
Well, thank you so much, Eric in Cape Town. Staying in Cape Town, Janusz, good morning.
Good morning, Sakina. Sakina, it's strange to me that actually Cameroonian people trying to protect the colonial languages like French and English, not like in our country where everything is done to remove the colonials, blame colonial for everything. Cameroonian people actually using these languages for their own advantages. Of course, they're trying to dominate some English or French. I don't know who's dominating which one, but they're using this language because they know that if they go overseas, they can find the jobs using the language of French and English. But also, Sakina would like to bring the similarity in our country, where the Western province is usually spoken by the Afrikaans and English to the colored and white people, and there is a feeling that actually also some of the people are discriminated. And I think it will be better for the ANC if this Western province will be a separate sort of independent state.
Huh?
Yes, many people. Yes, Sakina, there is also local party which is fighting for independence of the Western province. I don't know whether you heard about it, but they are growing. So, and the people are dissatisfied of the abuse and criticizing all Africans and even English and pushing.
No,
So,
but that is very different from what we've understood here to be the case. These were two separate countries, as we understand, that were brought together. So the fact that, we are squabbling over languages in South Africa is quite different, actually.
No, but it's different, but quite serious. So maybe one day you're going to bring this discussion. What should we do? Should we actually combine and use the language, not use the language as an enemy, but use the language as a friend?
Well, thank you so much, Janusz. I mean, some would say this speaks to perhaps the success of colonial assimilation. The fact that, we would characterize this as an Anglophone versus Anglophone versus Francophone situation. I mean, there are many ways of actually looking at it, but it's something that did also cross my mind. Gerald in Durban, good morning to you.
Hi, Sakina.
Hi.
Hi, it's a bit disappointing you don't have anyone from our own Department of Foreign Affairs because, this goes on in many countries in Africa where people are getting butchered over some political or ideological difference. I mean, if you had any threat of morality, you would feel obliged to speak out. Now, it's amazing that you've got African countries that pitch up at the UN and they'll speak out against Donald Trump, literally with blood on their hands. They don't mention a word in the AU. We have a government as well. I mean, we're supposed to be the bastion of democracy in Africa, a model case. But we'll sit with our government of foreign affairs and we'll entertain these dictators, literally with blood on their hands. It's just amazing that that no one speaks out. And then these same African governments, they are lobbying for a seat on the UN Security Council as permanent members. Now, how can you allow people with such questionable morality to ask for seats? I mean, these people literally have blood on their hands. But
who is beyond reproach in that regard at this stage?
No, there's no one beyond reproach. But certainly you have an obligation to speak out on behalf of people who are getting butchered, especially when they're your neighbors and especially when you punching African solidarity.
But remember, these are sovereign states. These are sovereign
states. And half
states.
his citizens are staying here because he's butchered them and he's destroyed their economy. We were entertaining him.
Oh, so what's supposed to happen, Gerald? Are we not supposed to recognize Zimbabwe,
when the
Cameroon?
When the nationalist government was perpetrating human rights atrocities in this country, rightly so, people stood up at the UN and they spoke out. They spoke out against that. Every citizen has an obligation to speak out on behalf of the oppressed and the downtrodden. That's your obligation in life. Every African government spoke out against the nationalist government during the dark days of apartheid. Where is that obligation today?
All right. Got you there, Gerald in Durban. Let's run through a few more calls. Sope in Pretoria, good morning.
Hello.
Hi.
Good morning, ma'am.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you very much. I think the problem in Cameroon is one that can only be solved through an independence for the people of the Southern Cameroon, because should we say we get a federation, which we had before, we're going to go back to the same status which we are in now, because we're just going to end up being swallowed by the people of the French Cameroon. I like the fact that the spokesperson, Mr. Milton, Taka, and the governing council wants us to get an independence. A federated system cannot work for a French African colony, because the French people will never let us get that independence that we have. They won't let us get the federation, because they want to still be in control of the system. And giving us that federation means they won't be in control of the system, which is tantamount to giving us an independence, which is what they don't want.
Okay.
So we can go back to a federated system of government.
Well, thank you so much for the call. Someone's asking for the number 0891 104 208. That's our call-in number. Ransom in Cape Town, good morning.
Good morning. Hi, Sakina.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just want to say something about that Cameroon issue. The problem, I think I see on Twitter, they say the problem is about the language. Not about the language, it's about the region. So the two regions, the southern Cameroon region and, if you want, the northern part of the region. So it just so happens that the southern Cameroon portion of the country was colonized by the English. So, Sakina, the only solution to this is that there need to be a referendum and there need to be separation of the two countries, because from, where I grew up in Cameroon and, and both work in the southern and the northern side of Cameroon, and what I see there is, first, the laws are very different. The English laws and the French laws are very different. I'll give you a very simple example. The French laws, they believe that they can arrest you for any reason and lock you up for as long as possible until you have evidence. So basically, in the French system, everyone is guilty until you're proven innocent. But in the English system, everyone is innocent until you're proven guilty. So in that context, there's just no way the two countries can ever come together and form some kind of a unity country or a united Republic of Cameroon. So that split needs to happen. The country needs to be split. Cameroon, the southern Cameroon section needs to gain some kind of their own independence and define who they want to be. What their future would entail and what they want to be. So
okay.
That's a big thing.
It is a big thing.
Yeah, I believe that they tried to the unity that they tried to do in the past. The referendum was totally wrong and it was incorrect. It was a totally incorrect decision to take. But yeah, thanks for your time. Thanks very much, Sakina.
And thanks for the call, Ransom. Dr. Leandre in Joburg, good morning.
Yes, morning, Sakina.
Welcome to the show.
Yes, Sakina, I want just to say that this problem is an external factor, because it is very shameful for some people to come and claim on the base of the colonial inheritance. So before the coming of the whites, there were only one Cameroonian. One Cameroon. It is like two thieves who stole and divided into two, and then one suddenly say, "Oh, I belong to this thief," instead of claiming his freedom. In fact, we know that there is an institute in the United States that is manipulating these people, targeting the African region who have people and targeting the minority. They did it in South Sudan. Tell me, the people of South Sudan are they better now than before? We know that this project is from the US and the UN, and even your so-called analysts, I don't know, it's very shameful for her to say this person, she's not talking with fact. This person tell me this, I hear this one saying this. It's very, very shameful. Even your panelists, this problem, if it was a problem between Cameroonians, it would have been very easy. We can solve everything between ourselves. But we know that there is external force that are manipulating all those naive, and they are believing that if they have their own state, they will be better. This is a big lie. Look at what is happening in South Sudan. In Cameroon, this southern Cameroon, there are two tribes who hate each other. The people from Bamenda and the southwest and the northwest, they hate each other. If the Americans succeed to divide Cameroon, the next step will be to divide, to cause the fight between northwest and southwest, exactly like they are doing in South Sudan. So, Sakina, this problem is very deep than what we think.
It's a complex problem. I think that we agree on. It's a complex problem, and the solutions are not going to come easily. We only have 30 seconds to each of you to give us your final thoughts on this. Dr. Akum, let's start with you. We seem to have lost Dr. Akum there. Ilaria?
Yes. For us as Amnesty International, I think it's going to be very important to call on the Cameroonian authorities to refrain from the use of unlawful force in its response to the protesting and to the demonstrations of the Anglophone community. Eyewitnesses have recounted that the security forces fired live rounds and tear gas to people and demonstrators. So we call on the Cameroonian authorities to investigate the use of excessive, unnecessary force to shed the light on the circumstances of these killings and injuries that we have documented by conducting a thorough, impartial, effective investigations, and to make sure that those suspected of criminal responsibility for these deaths are brought to justice.
And Milton, Taka, your final thought, and also what is the solution here?
All right. Would like the world to know that this is a state-on-state conflict. What is happening in our territory is black-on-black colonialism. That is genocide in the making, and the world must not turn a blind eye because there's indiscriminate manslaughter, burning down of assets, houses, properties, live bullets being used on pupils, specifically the shooting of pupils' legs, very similar to what happened in Sierra Leone. The cutting of internet to ensure the world does not know the carnage taking place in our country. We call upon the United Nations to come in immediately. They had called for restraint to be shown by the La Republique government and the Ambazonian people. The Ambazonian people marched peacefully. La Republique used massive repression, state terrorism to clamp down on our people, and it continues to this moment as we're speaking, and their mass graves, one that investigated, like Ilaria had just said. We call upon immediate dialogue because this problem must be solved on a dialogue table with an independent moderator in a neutral country, and that independent moderator should be the UN, with AU, Britain, France as key parties, and Nigeria. This terrorist government must demilitarize our area, release all our people, account for the death because a lot of our people remain missing, and the world should know that we are separating because the union has not worked. Our independence has been declared and it will be defended. We call upon a referendum. That is the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that was Milton, Taka, spokesperson for the Southern Cameroonian Ambazonia Consortium United Front. And we also had with us Ilaria Allegrozzi from Amnesty International and Dr. Fonteh Akum from ISS. So that's where we're going to leave it this morning. Clearly a very complex issue and by no means the last that we've heard about this particular development. And we'll be back with you tomorrow. Thanks for your participation. Thanks to the production team.